I do think it's a really beautiful thing. I will never have the words to really express the bond that I feel with Aza. There's just no words for it. But I think it's the closest that I will ever get to self-love is whatever that bond is.
Happy time zone, everybody. There we go. Perfect.
Welcome back to Plural Conversations at the House Fates for Life podcast. This is Matt from the Voices of Just a Rather Very Insane System, aka Jarvis.
Hi, and we are the Unfiltered Universe. Various fronters at various times, and it's not going to stay consistent, I can guarantee that. But we're really happy to join you today.
And we have special guests today. We welcome Fred&Aza, who join us for this podcast episode today. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. Well, us, me,
Yeah.
Whatever.
Whatever. And Fred&Aza have, they suggested to talk about a topic today that they are very familiar with, which is called, I don't know, us as Germans, we would say Dæmonism? Or how would you pronounce it, Fred?
I would pronounce it demonism, but there are some people in the community that do call it daemonism. So both pronunciations are okay.
All right.
Good to know.
And just to let our audience know, brief content warning, because we will use the term daemonism, demonism, demons a lot in this podcast, which might sound like it's related to a religious concept, but we promise you it's not. It's just, unfortunately, the same name for different concepts, and we understand that might be triggering or off-putting for some in the audience.
So, yep, as always, take care of yourself, please.
Yep.
Yes. And yeah, thank you for switching into this episode. And if you want to support us and help us spread the word about plurality and daemonism, just leave a like, subscribe, comment. We always love hearing comments and hearing your opinions and your experiences. That being said, let's begin. So, Fred&Aza, why don't you introduce yourselves to the audience however you feel comfortable sharing here on this podcast episode?
Sure. So, hi, hello. My name is Fred. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a dæmian, which is someone who does demonism, and I'm also the host of a system. I'm in my early 30s, and I've got Aza with me. She's co-conscious. She is my demon. She can hear us, but she won't speak, so I can relay her answers. And thank you for having us on this podcast.
Welcome.
You're so welcome. So yeah, demonism, daemonism. In your words, what is that actually? What does that mean?
It's basically a kind of a practice where you communicate with a part of yourself and you give that part of yourself a name and like some level of independence and a visual form, which is typically it's a sort of animal. And you talk to that part of yourself, you see that part of yourself, and you interact with it. Like you learn to meet them, you see them sort of kind of in your mind's eye, a bit like imagination, if you will, and you hear them in your mind, and you make them a part of your life.
Nice.
So the first time we came across that term or that concept was when we read this book.
Yes.
Maybe also people in the audience know that book. Is it actually, is it based on that, or is it just coincidence? We don't really know.
It is based on that. So how the demonism community started was, and the book we're talking about, just for context, is originally was a trilogy. Now there's more books, but it's called His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. And in that story, in that universe, all the humans in the world of the protagonist have a demon. And it's their soul, literally, but outside of their body, and that takes the form of an animal. And in the books, the demons, they can talk, they can move, they can think, they can interact with the world. They're understood to not be literally an animal. They're just sort of shaped like an animal, and they can shapeshift. For children, they change from like a cat to a dog to a deer to whatever they want to be. And then later in life, around puberty, they take one specific form that they're going to keep forever for the rest of their life. And that represents their human. And there's a lot of people who read that book and read about the relationships between the humans and their demons. It's a really strong bond between the two. Like if a human is hurt, their demon is hurt. If you kill a demon, you kill the human. They're really linked to one another in a way that you couldn't separate them without at least really harming them. And yeah, a lot of people read that book and went, wow, I want that. That sounds really cool to have, you know? Sort of friend that's always going to be with you, that understands you better than anyone else and is like on your side always. And yeah, so some people went, I want that. And they did it. And they created a community around it. So slowly there were guides that were created on like how to meet your demon, how to communicate with your demon, how to see your demon. And even like there's whole ways within the community on how to find what form like your demon would take, the forever form, which we call the settled form that represents you and your personality. And slowly that created the demonism community. So it's really based on those books originally.
Okay. So first question is if you ever meet someone from the demonism community, is there any etiquette that we should be aware of how to be respectful when we talk about the concept of demonism and dæmians, right? That's the term for a person who practices this kind of demonism, right? Is it dæmian?
Yeah, that's it, exactly. It's dæmian is someone who has a demon.
Yay!
Demonism is like the practice or the community. There's a lot of other terms, but I won't go into like specific community lingo. Basic etiquette, honestly, if you're part of plural spaces, you kind of already understand that. Like, treat the person's demon with respect, like you would any person or headmate or alter. It's not because you can't see Aza or that you can't hear her that she's less important or anything like that. That's really the basic etiquette.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and clarifying that for us.
I definitely like to ask because you never know what's culturally appropriate in a new community, new to us community. So I definitely want to put that question out there and get more used to hearing it in general. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that regard, so if I think of demon now, the way you describe it and the way you also describe Aza to us, your demon, would you say they are basically like handmaids, or is there some difference between individuals in a plural system and demons?
Yes and no. The where do I start with this? It's you know how I said it's based originally on the book, His Dark Materials. So at first the community was sticking pretty close to what exists in the books, and slowly over time the community has gone a bit away from the books and says, well, it's not because that's how it is in His Dark Materials that's how it has to be in our world, in this life, and in this practice. And by widening what it means to be a demon, it means that there's a ton of different experiences and a ton of different ways to be a demon or to have a demon that exist in the community. I'd say most people who have a demon don't consider that to be plural necessarily, but some do. So it's sort of difficult to say what's the difference between a demon and, let's say, a headmate, because there's tons of ways to be a headmate and there's tons of ways to be a demon.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we can imagine that.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then there are people who are like hybrids in between who are daemons and also systems like you guys.
Exactly. So we would consider her to be a demon, but also an alter within our system.
Yeah, I imagine that this conversation is very hard to have with people who don't have any experience with plurality. And how do they, in the community, in the demonism community, do they make a careful distinction between the concepts, or, how is that approached?
There's really a vibe in the community of whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you. If you're a demon, you find that that's a plural experience for you, you label yourself as plural. If you have a demon, you don't think that's a plural experience for you, you don't label it as plural. And it's really like, do whatever you want forever, because this is such an individual practice. When we're talking about demonism, it's about who you are. It's about communicating with a part of you, and there's no like incorrect way to do that, if that makes sense.
Oh no, that's perfect. Yeah, I like that whole trying to find the right words here, but yes, it sounds
Attitude?
Yeah, attitude is probably the right word there.
Or mindset.
Yeah, the culture of acceptance is a beautiful thing, and I'm really happy to hear about more communities that have cultures of acceptance and places where plurals are welcome. That's
Yes.
That's pretty amazing.
It's a very plural friendly community. There's a lot of systems like us who do have demons within the demonism community, so it's very open to plural experiences in general, even if most people who have a demon are not plural themselves.
Right. I would say that because they have an experience that can conceptualize plurality, I call that a culturally plural. While not being plural themselves, they have a plural cultural understanding. I don't know if that rings true at all, but
yeah, it does. I have listened to some of you guys' podcasts.
Yes.
I remember one where you talked about cultural plurality, and I thought that was a really cool concept. And I would agree that because we have so much shared experiences with the plural community, things like, hearing a voice in your head and talking to that person within you, and considering that, like I was saying earlier, our demons are not less real or less important or less anything else because they're internal. And I think that's an experience and a mindset that resonates with a lot of the plural community as well.
I would agree. I'm nodding. You can't see me, and I know.
Yeah, same.
So,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to move on to the next question. So
yeah, us too.
Okay, yeah. So, do you want to explain how it works in any more detail? Or how would you call it become a demon or find your demon? How would you describe that process if you want to? Otherwise, you can absolutely pass.
I would say find a demon, but maybe before we go to that, I could try to give you more examples of what a demon could be.
Sure.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of different approaches to it. And like answering what's a demon has become a really tricky question, actually, because the community is so open to a variety of experiences. I find that it's kind of like defining what's a demon is a bit like trying to define what's a woman. It's become so inclusive that you cannot give a definition that is going to encompass 100% of people, but there's a lot of traits that many demons tend to have. So I would say one big defining characteristics of demons would be a strong bond with their dæmian. like you can't separate the two of them. They're not two completely separate people. Usually they're seen as two sides of the same coin. A bit close maybe to like a median system type of situation.
Okay. Do you want to explain that just a tiny bit in case our audience is not familiar with that term?
The concept of median system?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that's sort of in between singlet and plural, where that system doesn't feel fully like separate, independent entities within, let's say, but not fully like one singular entity either. So it's sort of like an in-between experience.
Okay.
For me and Aza, for example, I do feel like she is a part of me, and she does feel like I'm a part of her. Compared to some other alters in my system, I feel like they're their own person and they're separate. Whereas as I really feel like she is me. It's kind of weird to explain most of the time. It's like we are one person. And that doesn't make sense, but it makes sense.
Oh, it does, yeah.
I think for us plurals, it totally makes sense in a way.
Yeah.
But we understand the struggle of trying to explain what you feel inside.
And language is always going to defy the experience of consciousness.
That's true. That's true.
It's just, it's never going to be adequate. So we do our best and we try, and we're going to keep having conversations like this one and try and improve the richness of the soup, right? Getting closer. So, yeah.
Let's see. Other traits that a lot of demons, like if I'm going to go back to what we were on earlier, a lot of demons tend to have animal forms that they take, and usually they can shapeshift between different forms. So there's absolutely demons who will appear as, I don't know, mythological creatures or even have a human form, but most of them tend to have animal forms. Most demons don't front. We have a word for it in the community, and it's called projection, and that's where we take like the image, the mental picture, if you will, of our demon, and we superimpose it on the world. So for example, Aza right now, she's perched on my shoulder in her barn owl form. I don't literally see, like with my eyes, a barn owl, but in my mind's eye, I can see her and know that she's there.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's exceptions. There are demons that do learn to front, but most of them tend to have this sort of mental projection image outside of the body instead of taking over the body sort of experience.
Okay. But does that, I assume, I mean, okay, this is going to be like a two-part kind of question, but so asking one about the experience in general as you understand it from the community, and also your guys' personal experience. Is like, does that extend just beyond, I mean, you talked about the visuals just now, but does that extend to tactile?
It can.
Can you feel her?
I can't. Unfortunately, I would love to. I can sort of imagine it, but I can't really feel it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some people who, with practice, they're able to get to something where they can feel it a bit more, I guess. But for us, we've never been able to.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of also a bit partially an inherent affinity. Like, I know some people have aphantasia and can't do the visual projection in their minds, but maybe have good imaginary audio hearing, like hearing songs in your head that aren't playing outside anywhere, or things like that, and with all the different senses, I guess.
Yeah, so there's people for who, like, communication, they'll find that very easy, but they can't do visual projection. And there's people who might be the opposite. They find it very easy to see their demon and maybe to feel their emotions, but actual words, it doesn't work for them. And that's fine too. You just gotta find the way that works for the both of you to communicate.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to note that contrary to what anyone might think going in, you don't get to choose necessarily how this all plays out.
Yeah.
It really is a relationship between, your body and your tendencies and, and the broader things. It's like, with plurality itself, it's really hard to really, I don't know. I don't know where that all centers in. So not really. Huh.
Yeah, like what's part of the plural experience and what's part of human experience, right?
I think the plural experience is part of the human experience.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We agree. So just thinking about, your expression of disappointment that it doesn't always play out the way you hope it will. It's like, because some of it's still out of our control.
Yeah.
And, you could work towards what you want, but you're still limited by factors that are hard to define, is what I'm trying to say.
I'd say in general too, there's some people that I've seen, they come to the idea of demonism and like, bam, they have a demon within 2 days, or immediately they're able to see something and hear something. And there are some other people who come into the community and they need to really work at it before they can start hearing or feeling or seeing their demon. It's like some people have an affinity to that sort of thing, and for some other people, it requires more work for them, just in general as a practice.
Sure, that makes complete sense to us.
Yeah, this reminds us of the concept of tulpamancy, where in the plural community is when you intentionally create a headmate system member in your system. And I guess there's also people who have an affinity for it. For them works well. Maybe if you are already a system, then it might be easier to create new system members and so on. Would you say they're like similarities to like finding your demon and tulpamancy, or are they somehow different on a fundamental level? What's your take on that?
I think they're different in terms of the community around them, and the way that we approach creating a tulpa or creating a demon is so different, so it produces different results in a way. Because like with tulpamancy, and I'm not a tulpamancer myself, but I know a bit about it, and they tend to focus on wanting to create autonomous sort of entity that is separate from them. That's the end goal. Whereas with demonism, you're trying to reach a part of you that is already within you. And that sort of produces two different results. But who knows? Maybe...
Sure.
Because I didn't start demonism because of finding the demonism community. I had a demon because I read the books and I wanted a demon. That's sort of my entry into it. But who knows, if I had found the tulpa community before I found the demonism community, maybe that would have influenced us, and maybe Aza would consider herself a tulpa. I don't know.
Right.
So I don't think it's like two completely different experiences. It's more the way that the community frames those experiences and builds from there. That's where it creates like a difference.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
In the end, it's what works for you guys and where you feel accepted and where you want to be in community just as much as anything else. So
yeah, there's that too.
Yeah. And it sounds like, I mean, I don't know much about tulpamancy at all, so I won't speak to that. But it sounds like one of the primary differences too, from what I'm hearing, would be that the bond is so important in the demonism. So
yes, that's also a difference, is the bond. There's also I touched a bit on it earlier, but form finding is also a big part of the demon community, where you try to find an animal form that best fits your personality, and that entire concept just does not have an equivalent in tulpomancy or in most other like plural communities. So that's also something that's unique to demonism.
Sure. I'm nodding again. You can't see me.
Yeah, and we are very much in awe right now. We find that whole concept very fascinating, very cool, very beautiful.
Really glad you're here to share it.
Yeah, I do think it's a really beautiful thing. I will never have the words to really express the bond that I feel with Aza. There's just no words for it. It's not like a romantic sort of bond. It's not like a sibling sort of bond. It's not like a friend sort of bond. But I think it's the closest that I will ever get to self-love is whatever that bond is.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Amazing.
Just lovely. So yeah, do you want to talk more about Aza now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, or rather, we actually wanted to ask Aza directly. Like you said, we can ask her questions and she will answer, but you will.
So, yeah, sort of translate in a way. It's like she's talking to me and then I relay the answer to you, basically.
Right.
So yeah, Aza, how is it? How does it feel like to be a demon? What is your experience like? I'm really curious about that.
She's saying that it's a bit lonely because she is sort of invisible to most of the world, but there's a comfort with that invisibility as well.
Yeah.
Can you describe to us what that comfort is? Is that the connection to Fred or something more that we can't see?
It's that there's sort of a safety and freedom of being unseen. Like how could I say this? Like, imagine that you exist in a world where nobody can see you at all. You could scream, you could like jump around in the middle of the street, you could do any cringe thing that you can imagine. You can do it consequence free forever. And you have a friend with you and you can tell that friend whatever you want, make whatever faces at what's happening around you without any judgment. So that's a sort of freedom that she has as someone who's completely invisible. She can do whatever she wants forever.
Freedom from scrutiny.
Yeah.
I'm nodding a lot because when we are out on the walk, and for example, my headmate Will is fronting and I'm co-conscious, then I'm also like, I can be visually like a projection outside of our body. I just go wild. I just do things. Will always complains I'm like a dog who's just running around from like letting loose from the leash and just doing whatever. Whatever the fuck I want.
It's like two sides of a, like on the one hand she has all that freedom to say whatever she wants and never be heard, and there's a safety of never being seen. Like, how could you even judge something that you literally doesn't know exists, right? But on the other hand, it means that nobody can see her, nobody knows she exists, and sometimes that's the downside to it, is it can get a bit lonely.
Yeah. That's a common plural experience too, of the but of there always being more to you, more to everything than is visible. But anyway, what were you going to say, Jarvis?
I was asking how do you now feel being on a podcast, being interviewed together with Fred, and like basically being now heard by the public?
She's ruffling her feathers. She's like, she's grumpy. It's okay.
Okay. We just don't want you to feel uncomfortable here.
if someone's demon's in a final form?
It's not rude to ask, but it doesn't quite work like that. Maybe I could talk a bit about like the idea of settling, which is finding like your final form and things like that. Yeah.
Sure. Please lead the conversation. I'm culturally blind here, you know?
That's fine. So the idea, yeah, so basically I'll start from just the general idea of the book so you can understand what inspired it and where it's sprouted from. So in the book, at like puberty, I think, the demon before could change forms at will and then takes a form that they can't switch forms after that forever, it's done. And that form has some deeper meaning into like the personality of the human. So for example, it could be something like someone who's very resilient and always, a small person with a big fighting spirit could have a Wolverine as a demon. Someone who's super scared and anxious and alert all the time might have, I don't know, a mouse or a rabbit or something like that as a demon. Now, in our world, at 13 years old, you don't just like magically discover who you are forever. It just doesn't work. Like people keep changing even into adulthood. And there's no magic way that your demon is going to take a form and that has some deeper meaning. So the community came together and created sort of a way to look at animal behavior and translate a bunch of animal behaviors into human personality traits. And there's like a catalog within the demon forums of a bunch of different animal species, with each saying like, oh, here's all the behavior of that animal, and here's what this behavior would mean for a human. And then what you would do is you have to look within yourself and say, okay, well, who am I as a person? What are my personality traits? What are my values? How do I react in certain situations? And you're supposed to look at then sort of the self-portrait that you've made of yourself and then compare it to all these animals and find the animal that is maybe not a perfect 100%, but like the best possible match for you. Now, that doesn't mean that the demon is now locked into that form forever, because we don't have the rules of like what's in the book. So you could find your form and then say, oh yeah, that's a really cool form, but my demon doesn't like taking it, so we're just never going to take it. That's cool.
Oh, sure.
You could find your form and then decide that, you're going to take it most of the time, but then you can still shapeshift if you like. That's cool too.
Sure.
There's two big like form finding systems in the community. One that is the first one that I described earlier, which is like based on animal behavior. And then there's a second one that was created a bit later. And this one focuses more on the mythology around an animal, or the ways that we tend to like think that snakes are like liars in most stories, and foxes are clever and things like that. Like the imagination of different cultures regarding an animal. So that's another form finding system. You could have two settled forms if you look at both systems, or you could do just one, or you could never get into that because you don't care.
Sure.
But so yeah, when you're asking, does someone have that final form? Well, maybe they have found one form within one of the systems, but it doesn't mean that it's final. They could, I don't know, 5 years later decide to go back to form finding and realize like, oh, my personality has changed since. So now I'm going to find a new form that better fits how I've grown as an individual. It's not really like final, if that makes sense.
Sure. Sure. And I appreciate the nuanced discussion of how that plays out too. I didn't make any assumptions that settling meant a final form, but there's no way you'd know that. So
I wasn't thinking that you were trying to define something. I'm just explaining it to show how it can work.
Absolutely. And it's good if we go into this, talking like people who are listening are completely culture blind about it. So I
Yeah.
thank you for all of the nuance. So I just wanted to ask Aza about how she feels about her form, and if she's had other forms that she really liked.
She says it's practical. So I always have to put more words than she puts, because otherwise this would just be like 2-word responses. But yeah, basically she likes having one form that when you're a shapeshifter, sometimes you wake up in the morning and you're like, what am I gonna be? And you have all the options of all the animals in the world. It can be a bit much. So our settled form is the barn owl, and that's sort of her by default form. And she finds that very useful. Doesn't know what to be right now, barn owl. Don't have to think.
Yep.
But she's also got, I'd say she tends to really like big cats, small mammals, birds, and just animals that are brown or beige or black. She doesn't do funky colors. Like I couldn't imagine her as a parrot or something like that, because that's just not her.
Okay. Into the invisible, the camouflage and stuff.
More muted.
It's not her style.
yeah, not her style. She's more like muted, natural colors, browns, beige, nothing that like stands out too much.
Mm-hmm.
That's more her vibe.
That makes complete sense, and that also leans into the practical. So
yeah. She also takes different forms depending on what's, like you said, practical, what's more practical. So if we're traveling in a car, it's more practical to be a mouse, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
If we're walking, I don't know, in a forest, it might be more practical. She has more room, so she could be a cougar if she wanted, because that's more practical for that. And sometimes we just walk down the street and we see like a squirrel, and she's like, oh, squirrel. And then she shapeshifts to that, because sudden inspiration.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, yeah. Sorry, I'm distracting myself in all this because that was lovely. I really enjoyed that description. Thank you. I was going to say, how would you guys describe each other? What would you tell us about Fred and vice versa?
She says that I worry too much. Which fair. She's the more, I would say she's the more grounded one, and I'm more of the anxious one.
Mm-hmm.
We would both say that we love each other very much. I'd say we're both pretty introverted, but she's a lot more introverted than I am. Kind of because of what she is as well. You have to be a bit introverted to live a life where you're unseen constantly.
Yeah. She
says that she really likes my imagination and creativity. And I really appreciate her patience with me, and she's very she'll help ground me if my mind is too scattered and I can't focus. She's able to like calm me down and get me back to the sort of to the present and focus on what I need to be doing. Or sometimes she'll distract me because she knows I can take it at that moment and she wants to be annoying, but
my heart. It's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing it too. One question that is running through my head all this time when you were talking about finding a more settled form, discovering your demon and stuff. I'm just wondering, since you're also a system, and I think as far as I understood from our previous conversations, you always have been the system that you are today.
I don't know that, but continue.
But like, and you don't have to share if you don't want that question, just say pass.
That's fine. That's fine.
But how was that for you as a system? or being a host of a system and trying to find your demon and your settled form when there are also these other people who might kind of interfere with that process? How was that for you?
You know what? I'll start like chronologically on that one, on like how we got started with demonism, and it was years before finding the demonism community. I was probably somewhere in primary school, but I don't remember what age precisely. I read his dark materials, and I was just so touched and inspired by the relationship between the protagonist and her demon. And I had a lot of imagination. So like creating an imaginary friend that was a shape-shifting animal, easy, bam, done, you know? not even a problem. I don't think it was something that I was taking seriously necessarily at the time, but I didn't have a lot of friends. Certainly the ones that I did were not, let's say, quality friends. And so yeah, this idea in the book of, I still remember like that the final scene of the first book, and where, you know, the protagonist has gone through a lot of stuff, and her and her demon at the end, they tell each other, we're never going to be alone because we're always gonna have each other. And I wanted that. And so yeah, I had imagination and I had Aza.
Boom.
Yeah, I remember like it was effortless, because like when you're a child and you create an imaginary friend, you don't have, as an adult, you're like, oh my God, am I doing this right? Or is this all fake? Or is this like, am I really doing it? Or am I doing it good enough? When you're a kid, you don't care about any of that. So yeah, in my memories, it was pretty easy. I wanted a demon and I created one. Aza sees it a bit differently. She says that it's not so much that I created her. She feels like she was always there in some shape or form, but when we read his dark materials, she saw something that she could be and that she wanted to be, that sort of role that she could fulfill.
Mm-hmm.
And she latched onto that, and she became a demon at that moment. We learned pretty quickly that talking to people about this was not a good idea, because
yeah, I imagine.
Sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately. So we were more private about it from that point on. Then we didn't know anything about being a system at that point, so it was just the two of us. And somewhere in high school, I started having actually like good, reliable friends, like great people. And there wasn't a need for Aza to be there anymore, because I had that social support. I didn't need an imaginary friend anymore. And I remember somewhere in like high school or something, we said our goodbyes. And I remember it was very emotional. Like, I was letting her go, and she was letting me go as well. Now, being more aware of different like plural terms, I would say that she went into a dormancy at that moment. We knew she wasn't like going in the sense of like dying, but yeah, I would describe it as dormancy now. So she went silent, not there anymore for some time. And in my early 20s, I discovered that I was trans, and that was very overwhelming as an experience to go through, and I needed my friend, and she came back.
That's so beautiful.
And actually, I transitioned from like female to male, and she used to be male, and she transitioned to female as well. Like we sort of switched genders somewhere in there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Even at first I was opposed to her switching. Yeah, that's how you say it. So I was opposed to her switching genders, because I was very attached to like, my imaginary friend has to stay like the same way, and it's not because I'm changing that my friend needs to change. And at some point, as I had to be like, look, you're growing, you're changing, I need to have the freedom to be able to do that as well. And I was like, oh, oh yeah, that, you know what? Yeah, no, I get it. I have to let go of the image of you that I had because you need to be able to grow too. And so yeah, we sort of swapped genders in a weird way and renamed her because her name, I won't say what her name was, but I will say, and it'll give you an idea of the age we were, that she had a Pokemon name previously. So it was a good thing to change it at that point.
Honestly, I was thinking when you told us about Aza popping up when you were at primary school, I was like, I think we're not sure, we can't travel back to time, but I think I met. I was actually a Pokemon back then.
Yeah, wow.
Oh. And I have Pokemon fans in my household, and I'm gonna say right now that I have no expectations that there's an age limit on Pokemon. So just like it's fine for you guys to have outgrown it and for not to be important to you anymore. But I'm not gonna put that out there as something as an expectation for everyone.
No, it's just for us. It was like, yeah, maybe that's also a good opportunity to have a name that's a bit more unique and not like copied from Pokemon. So we changed her name to what it is now, which is Azalthea, which is her full name, or Aza. And yeah, we went. That's about when we found the Dæmonism community, and we were like, "What? Other people do that?" We thought it was just us. We thought we had this this thing that was a bit unique, and then we found that, oh, actually there's a lot of other people who also read that book or later on like saw the movies, and then there's a TV series, and who did the same thing as us. And there's also people then who find demonism, and that's how they get into demonism. But yeah, for us that was like a surprise to know that demonism existed after having had a demon for so long. And then about 10 years after finding demonism, we learned that we were a system. And it brought a lot of complications. I would say it was particularly difficult for Aza as a demon to have to learn to share my mind with others. She was used to being the only one that, lived in my head, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly there's a bunch of other people. And suddenly, yeah, it's a lot of time sharing. You probably, I know a lot of other systems also have that struggle of like, there's so many of us, how do each of us get like time and energy for ourselves? So that was particularly a challenge for Aza to sort of learn to share that internal space, and also to learn to befriend some of the others in the system, which is work that I had to do as well. At first, I was super scared of everyone. So the settled form that we have, it's representative of my personality as Fred. But if we wanted to, we could probably try to find settled forms for the others in the system.
If they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was going to ask if your other alters see themselves as more akin to you, Fred, or more akin to Aza, or some other variation. Like, is it possible for some of your other headmates to want their own demons, that kind of thing?
That's something that happens in other systems where different alters or different headmates will have each their own demon.
Mm-hmm.
For us, that's not really what we want or what's happened. We now consider Aza to be sort of our shared demon.
Okay.
Would you agree with that, Azar, or what's your opinion on that? How do you feel about that?
She feels differently about different system members, essentially. So she feels very close to me. She feels very close to Morgan, who's our ex-host. And actually, one of the reasons that we knew that Morgan was a previous host was because her and Aza immediately clicked.
Mm-hmm.
It was like there was a bond between them already.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, like instantly. So we knew that because of the familiarity, she had to be a previous host, and that turned out to be the case. But there are some other system members that Aza doesn't feel quite good with yet.
Sure.
And everyone in the system so far has been very respectful of that. So they know that, okay, Aza doesn't feel comfortable with me. She doesn't need to be there. There's some that she's warming up to. There's some that she's not warming up to. And we still consider that she's like collectively our system's demon. But the relationship that she has to different altars is different.
Which is a reasonable expectation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, if you guys are all as different, then everyone needs different things and you're going to have different relationships. So yeah, that makes perfect sense to us.
Yeah.
In that regard, would you say that demonism, knowing about demonism before plurality, did that help you orienting yourselves in your systemhood and your plurality?
I think absolutely. When, because the first altar that started like coming forward was Jenny, and when she started coming forward, I mean, Aza and I, we had already mastered talking to each other internally, feeling each other's emotions internally, just the concept of being many in one head. So, like system communication, we had that all set up the moment that Jenny arrived, sharing our thoughts, our memories, all of that, because we don't have any like amnesia between system members in my system. So I think that probably was also due to having all this sort of plurality practice in a sense with Aza for so many years. When Jenny came along, we're like, okay, we can talk internally. That's done. That's no problem. I can have a rough feeling of your emotions instantly. That's done. I know everything that you know, and you know everything that I know. Done. All that we had to learn, well, I had to learn that more than two and fronting was the big thing that we didn't have with me and Aza. But I think absolutely having a demon early on set me for like a much easier time in collaborating like with the rest of the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
And we learned about systems through the demonism community. Like, I don't know what I would have thought of Jenny when she started appearing and like grabbing front. I don't know what I would have thought if I'd never heard about systems before.
Right.
But I had in the demonism community. And without that, maybe I wouldn't have been exposed to it.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's always hard to say, right?
Yeah. I'm grateful whenever I hear of anybody having anything that smooths their transition from understanding themselves as a more singlet to their system, you know. So I'm glad you had that that skill set under your belt, under your wings already.
We're nodding.
Because discovery can be so rough, you know.
Yeah. As I liked that you said, under your wings.
Aw.
That's especially fitting for her right now.
I'm glad. I'm glad you're here, Aza. Yes, I'm glad Fred has brought you here so we could get to know you too.
Yeah. And we would love to have a much deeper conversation, but unfortunately we're always limited by time for this podcast. So
yes.
Maybe as some final words, if now people in the audience, you've piqued their interest, you definitely have piqued our interest. And if you wanted to learn more about demonism or even become dæmians or like find our demon form, are there any like resources, any tips anything that you would like to share with the audience and with us?
Yeah, if you're interested in demonism, there's not too many different separate communities. It's mostly one big community. There's a forum, and then there's a linked Discord server. So the first step would be, I would probably point anyone who is interested in demonism to the Demon forum and the Demon page. Maybe if you'd like, I can give some links that we can paste like in the video description.
Yeah, we will do that. We will put all the links you send us go there.
Okay. So yeah, the community is really open to people coming in who want to ask questions or who are curious on how to get started and things like that. So that would be the place to go if someone is interested.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we get in the episode?
Right now, I can't really think of anything that wouldn't get a whole new conversation started.
Okay.
So just, yeah, thank you for having us. It's been great. There's not a lot of people who know about demonism, and it's such a positive experience. Like if you go into the demon community and you ask people about their relationship with their demon, you're gonna hear pretty much nothing but positivity. So I wish more people knew about it and that it was an option.
Agreed. Thank you so much for coming here and telling us all about it.
Us too.
Thanks for having us.
We're very grateful. And also, yeah, to our audience, if you have anything you would like to share, anything that you find important, that's either sharing some stories about yourselves or something about concepts, communities, anything you would like to share with the world, we really invite you to come here onto our podcast and talk about your experience, about your passion. And also thank you, Fred&Aza, for being our first interviews here. We've been doing this for our very first time, and we think you were a great guest, and we really enjoyed this interview with you guys. And if you, our audience, if you like this episode, then please leave a like, comment, ask your questions in the comments, because I think there's a whole lot more to demonism, and I'm sure Fred&Aza are happy to answer your questions. This was me, Matt, from the Voices of Jarvis.
Oh, and we are the Unfiltered Universe.
And we are Fred&Aza&Co, and we were happy to be here.
Goodbye.
Clap, clap, clap.
Getting my voice ready.
Very important. Do all the coughing now.
Yes.
Clap, clap, clap.
Oh wait, we always do the happy times on the beginning, right? I forgot about that.
We generally do, yeah, but I didn't want to throw off your groove. So, do you want to join us for that, Fred?
What's the what?
We just say Jarvis usually counts to 3, and then we say together, happy time zone every many.
Can I say everybody? I just don't really use the every many sort of language.
Yeah, of course.
It's no big deal. Clap, clap, clap.
So
And if you had to...
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead and finish, and then I think I'll retain my thought here. Clap, clap, clap.
We really enjoyed this interview with you guys. And let me first collect myself what I want to say next.
Take your time.
Clap, clap, clap.
And we are Fred&Aza&Co, and we were happy to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you.
Awesome.
And very nice to meet you, Aza. We've met Fred before. Clap, clap, clap.
So do we do a 1, 2, 3 goodbye?
Sure.
I never know how to end these episodes.